Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest webinar on the three most important people in the recruiting process. My name is Patrick with Applied Healthcare. We're just going to let folks join the room while we get warmed up here. And we're excited to have this webinar today, our latest webinar on recruitment. Again, I'm Patrick with Applied Healthcare, Chief Operating Officer with Applied. And at Applied, if you don't already know, we recruit nurses for healthcare organizations across the US and Canada. We specialize in sourcing passive nurse candidates from non-job board channels, and we screen and engage with every applicant to help our clients get more nurse hires quickly. So we do host webinars twice monthly, and typically on topics related to nurse recruitment and recruitment generally in healthcare. And today we're going to focus on how you can improve your recruiting process by reassessing the role of three people: the hiring manager, the recruiter, and the candidate. Our guest today is Kevin Kirkpatrick. Kevin has led recruiting departments for 3 hospitals, and he is now running a search and consultancy firm called Avery Professional Group, where he provides advice and support to health systems who aren't happy with the status quo. So in today's webinar, Adam is going to be asking Kevin about how to provide the best experience to candidates, about motivating, leading, and improving a team of recruiters, about effectively managing relationships with hiring managers, how to maximize recruiting speed, and the best ways to report important results and improve effectiveness. So before we get started, I'm going to post my LinkedIn in the chat, and if we haven't connected already, let's connect, and I can tell you about both about Applied Healthcare, what we do, and about our upcoming webinars down the road. I also want to point out that we really want your questions and feedback during the webinar today, so please share any questions and ideas in the chat anytime, and Adam and Kevin will try and get to those during the webinar today. I'd also like to invite everyone to join our Nurse Recruitment Secrets Facebook group if you haven't already joined that as well. I'm going to put that link in the chat also. There's some good networks building there and for sharing tips and ideas and challenges and how people face challenges in nurse recruitment. So please join that. And last but not least, we do also have a monthly newsletter. That link in the chat as well, and you can register and sign up to get that newsletter delivered to you once a month. So on that note, I am going to turn it over to Adam Chambers. Adam is our president and founder of Applied Healthcare, and turn it over to Adam for your conversation with Kevin.
Yeah,
Hi,
okay,
Adam.
thank you so much. Cheers.
Sure.
Hi. We'll see you later, Patrick.
Sounds good.
So thanks everyone for coming. And Kevin has a wealth of experience, and I wanted him to share with me and you his philosophy behind improving a recruiting process, because I think he makes it very clear and understandable and digestible whenever he's spoken about it to me. So Kevin, do you want to go through, we could go through like a little bit about yourself and your approach, and then we could talk about those 3 steps: the hiring manager, the recruiter, and the candidate, one by one.
Sure, by all means. So I have had the luxury of working for 3 separate hospitals, leading their recruiting departments. Most of the times I came in when something needed to be changed or when it needed to grow, or there was issues with the relationships between the recruiters and the hiring managers. So I really kind of figured out how I was going to look at the success and the goals for my recruiting teams and stuff. And that it focused on really 3 relationships. One, the relationship with the candidate, because ensuring that they know how to find the job ads, they know what you're looking for, it makes sense what you're looking for, and they can apply easily, right? We all know, and we've all heard candidate stories where, they apply, fill out all of their profile, and then have to add a resume anyways, right? So looking at how they can apply, how they can find your jobs and stuff like that. The other one, and I think the one that sometimes gets overlooked, is the recruiter experience. Because if you make a recruiter's job too arduous, the likelihood that they're going to do and be able to do everything you need and be efficient goes down. Right? If they're spending all kinds of time managing an Excel spreadsheet that lists all their jobs and their time to fill and everything like that, that is not productive. I don't want recruiters doing data entry, right? Because at the end of the day, there's somebody that can do that better than them at a cheaper cost. Also understanding that they get the communication they need to be successful. So do they understand the role well enough? Is there, assistance understanding what they're looking for and where those people might be so that they can have a consultative discussion with their hiring manager. And then lastly is ensuring that the technology isn't an impedance, that it is actually helping them be more efficient as opposed to requiring them to log their activity in multiple spots, because I don't want them spending time on administrative tasks when they should be talking to hiring managers and talking to candidates. Then the last one that I look at is the hiring manager, right? Do we have enough of a relationship with them where they're providing us the information that we need? Do they feel like they're being listened to as well? And are they getting access to candidates that are viable as well as in a timely manner, right? So, in ensuring that their opportunities are met, and ensuring that you're reporting on what needs to be reported on and not on metrics that don't make sense, right? So, reporting on time to fill is great, but if you're if it's not a key indicator of your success, then, does it really make sense?
Mm-hmm. A lot of hospitals have so many openings that the average time to fill can get a bit discombobulated because some jobs have been open forever, like they haven't filled them in years. So,
well, and I think some of those things you need to look at how you're utilizing your time and batching jobs, right? And trying to source for, if you've got multiple oncology opportunities for oncology nurses, source oncology nurses first and then worry about whether they want full or part-time, right? So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to focus on just the part-time and I'm going to chase for part-time, and neglect full-time, right? So batch those two together and push forward just on oncology nurses. And then based on what the candidates are looking for, then derive that. But also try and ensure that you have a broad enough understanding of what vacancies that you have so that every conversation is A, are they a good fit? And B, where do they want to go? And where would they be a fit? And then start moving people forward in the process based on what the candidate wants, right? So, at the end of the day, there's never going to be fast enough because the number of vacancies is usually going to exceed the recruiters. One of the organizations I worked for, each recruiter had 70 vacancies, right? So that leads into my second point is if you can build a structure that allows for sourcing as opposed to just recruiting and posting and managing the volumes of posting, you allow yourself to start doing more outreach. Because if you have 70 vacancies, there is no way you are headhunting for any of them, right? Because you are just managing the flow of those 70, right? So if you can find a way to ensure that the systems are efficient, you're advertising, you're using an AppleChat and stuff like that, that you're getting the flow of candidates that allows you to deal with that so that you can then analyze which ones need active sourcing and focus your time on those while still managing the influx of the other ones.
So how do they go from not doing sourcing to doing it effectively? What are starting from zero, how do you get that up and running?
So one of the hospitals that I did some work with, actually, instead of replacing someone that left a recruiting role, they brought in a sourcer. Right. So that sourcer was her job was to generate candidates at a broader level. So just go after nurses, 7 days a week or 5 days a week. Her entire thing was just build networks with nurses. Right. Then once someone responded, you figure out what fit them. Right. It wasn't job to market. It was go to market, capture as many as you can. Right. Okay. And then funnel them that way. I think it's really just a case of focusing and building your team and dividing your team in a way that you allow yourself to manage the flow coming in, as well as giving yourself the time to proactively reach out. And I think what I would do is when I was a one-person band, because it's harder when you're one person, what I would often do is I would time slice, right? Every morning for an hour, I would just constantly be reaching out to nurses, right? trying to build my network on LinkedIn, trying to build my network through the different universities and colleges every day for that hour. And that was just my bring people in. Then I would approach the candidates that applied. And then, this is not the best advice, but often if I was sitting on the couch, because everybody's got a cell phone these days, I would just be flipping on LinkedIn while I was watching TV and messaging people that way. I don't encourage everybody to work 24/7, but if you're sitting there and it's easy enough to send some messages and stuff like that, sometimes I would do that as well.
Okay. We have a question. Adrian Young asks, what about cognitive bias and blind recruiting? Or does this not work within the medical sector? Have you got anything to say about that?
Yeah, so when it comes to bias in recruiting in general, I think there's two things to approach that. One is you can remove the names of the candidates if your ATS allows you to do that. I question whether that works, because then academic biases can come in. So if you're familiar with the universities and have a preference over which university, you can still have an implied bias based on their where they studied. But blind recruiting is definitely a way to an easier step to do it. The other thing I think is finding ways to advertise and put your messaging in front of diverse candidates, right? So, prime example is certain countries would have local employment conferences, and we would go to those and put our jobs in front of people from that ethnicity, just to make sure that where we were putting the message wasn't specifically in any one area, and that it was accessible to all. Then I think it comes down to auditing your process and training your staff to make specific rationales around why someone's being forwarded or not, and then be constantly measuring that, right? We implemented a tool called Ideal at one point. I think it's since been bought by Ceridian, and it allowed us to track the different demographics of the people that we were hiring, and this allowed us to constantly keep a pulse on it, so that if we knew our area where the hospital was located was a very diverse area, then we could measure and make sure that our workforce was as well.
Great, thank you very much. We did a campaign in Toronto using only Facebook advertising, and we got a disproportionately large amount of candidates who came from different countries. So compared to, say, the current population or indeed ads on Facebook, we got a more broad group. And we thought, one of the reasons was, I don't live where I'm from, and I use social media a lot to stay in touch and keep up to date with what's going on. So I'm on those channels more so than if someone lived natively here and had other family and friends around them. So it was just an interesting thing like that, where you don't really think about it until it happens, and then you try and figure out why. That goes a long way.
Well, the other thing too is if you look at access to information, something like Facebook is inexpensive, right? So you can have your Facebook on your phone. You don't necessarily need to have a PC at home and have a computer and internet at home. So if you're in a lower income setting, getting on Facebook is going to be easier than getting on LinkedIn, right? Or because LinkedIn now, some people can buy a job seeker license. Well, you have to have a certain level of income to do that. So the likelihood is, migrant populations are going to have access to Facebook on their phone, because that's probably one of the first things they do is when they get to a new country is get a phone so they can communicate with family and friends. So, and that's why I think in some cases texting works better than email as well, is because, everybody's tied to their phone. So sometimes getting to a specific demographic will be easier if you're doing it by text or by WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp is much more of a global messaging platform than just regular texting is, right? So if you want to ensure that your population that you're reaching is that, then maybe you apply WhatsApp.
I think outside job board is using that as a way to source is going to get more people who aren't necessarily self-confident or don't think they're worthy of a promotion or don't really back themselves, so they're not on the job boards. But if you can put something in front of them which says, yes, I do want you, then they're more likely to
well, that's when it comes to diversity, you mean applying a standard of referrals that encompasses everybody, right? Instead of just getting the white collar referrals, can we get referrals at all the different stages of the organization that we reach certain demographics, right? I once worked with a hospital a long-term care home in Manitoba, and they found that they had a large Filipino community. So their recruitment strategy was targeting Filipinos because they came to the organization and stayed longer because it was part of their social network, because there was a lot of staff there, right? So it's just looking at ensuring that as many people as possible have access to the information, and you then get it in front of as many people as possible across, all the different segments.
Yeah. I hope I answered your question. So now what I want to do is just go through each one in turn. So the candidates first, then the recruiters and the hiring managers. How can organizations that you consult with improve the experience they provide to candidates?
So I look at it in two things. One is the simplest part is looking at the apply process, right? And ensuring that it's easy to apply. You upload a resume. You're not having to fill out a ton of things, because we don't want the way they start their relationship with the organization to be arduous, right? So it's ensuring that it's easy enough to apply. The second part is ensuring that what you put out and the advertising that you do and your messaging to cold candidates is really just on point, and you are being, and have developed as much of a description of what you're looking for as possible, right? Because I find, especially with the physicians I work with, is that in my initial contact doesn't have details about the role and about the organization, I'm probably not getting a response. And I think that would have to be true for most candidates, that if you can't answer their first few questions in your reach out or in your ad, they're probably less likely to be engaged, right? So the other piece is feedback one way or another, right? Even if it's an email, right? It's at least something that says, hey, unfortunately, we have decided not to select you for an interview, or we've decided not to select you for this role, despite your interviews, and then try and give some feedback, right? Because we've all heard the black hole analogy of ATS as being a black hole. I think that comes down to not giving feedback, right? And in some cases, when we create a process, if you have, depending on the applicant tracking system you have, but the last hospital I worked for, I had the luxury of using iSIMS, and it allowed us to set messaging, and then we embedded text recruit in it as well. So it allowed us to send messages at every step of the process, right? An individualized message. So if that person was moved into not a fit, they got an email that said, unfortunately, you weren't selected for an interview. Then if someone moved to the phone screen, they would get a message that said, we'd like to do a phone screen. When are you available? Right? It's just treat them with as much respect as possible. And I know it's easy to apply, and sometimes you're getting more candidates than you need, but I think the way you treat people that apply definitely goes a long way to ensuring that you get more applicants and that you get the right applicants, right? Ensuring that you've got an easy to find site and your ads are succinct and realistic. Having a job ad that's 8 paragraphs of corporate mumbo jumbo doesn't help, right? 5 bullets that talk specifically and directly about the role is probably going to be more successful than paragraphs of corporate jumbo, right? So my reality is you can't over communicate with candidates. You can only under communicate with them. So try to err on the side of over communicating.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And yeah, the mumbo jumbo definitely does not go down well. And I think that's a feature of just automatically posting things from an ATS rather than taking the time to do it. What I want to do now is move on to talk about motivating, leading, and improving a team of recruiters. So this is going to be perhaps, I think, like, based on our work, number one difference that costs nothing. So it's not like you have to spend thousands more on sourcing to make this improvement. You can do it by changing a few things, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. So how can people motivate, lead, and improve a team of recruiters?
Yeah. So when I take on an assignment with a client, one of the things I try and do is sit with a recruiter and understand what their day looks like and what every applicant process looks like, right? And screening and stuff like that, because I want to understand, where they spend their time, right? So it's A, how do I manage my day? B, how do I manage the flow of candidates? And then the reporting aspect of it as well, right? So what I want to do is I want to create an infrastructure, whether it be technical or process driven, that allows them the most time doing the things that are most valuable to them, right? Because if I can ensure that a recruiter spends more time talking to candidates and less time combing through the ATS, I have to think that most recruiters would prefer that, right? Because they're predominantly outgoing people. So you look at how do they get the applicant, how do they screen the applicant, and how do they get the applicant to the hiring managers, right? And what does that look like, right? So do we look at how we screen candidates to ensure that maybe we ask several questions in an email instead of doing a full phone screen? And based on those, then we move to a phone screen, right? So it's really just looking at the process to identify where there's gaps, if there's gaps, and where there's overload, right? So, ensuring that we do that, and then ensuring that there's reporting structures and tools that allow them to report the applicant process without having to manage a spreadsheet plus the ATS, right? Nothing should be done twice. If it's done twice, you're automatically right then and there spending too much time doing something, right? So ensuring that you can manage your candidate flow, ensuring that you've got the tools you need, and then looking at time management and time prioritizing, right? One of the hospitals I worked for, my philosophy was always offer letters should be top priority, because the only way to lower your workload is to hire somebody, right? So if we're not hiring, we're juggling more balls in the air. So what I would say is when you start in the morning, the first thing you do is get offer letters out, right? Because that can bring the completion of a search. Offer letters go out first, then we look at posting jobs, then we screen. Right? Because each one is about moving momentum. So your offer letter gets that momentum to the hire. Posting gets that momentum to the candidate. Screening the candidate gets the momentum in order to go through the interview process. So look at activities that create momentum and move things forward, right? And we look at those activities, ensuring that there's no duplication and ensuring that there's as straight of a line to A and B as possible, and not curved lines where you've got to track something in three spots. I think also when you look at your overall team dynamic, you can look at identifying and looking at how you align client groups. Right. One of the things that at one of the hospitals was I had certain people that had a great relationship with their hiring managers, so they were protected. I wasn't going to move assignments or anything like that. But if someone came to me and said, this hiring manager and I are butting heads, it's not working, I would try to see if we could help fix it. But if fixing it didn't work, then we would alter assignments. And I also tried to ensure that each of the assignments had a bit of everything, or a little bit of focus, but enough variety that the recruiters didn't get bored and didn't, start to dislike what they were recruiting for.
Mm-hmm. Well, that leads me on to the motivation side of things. How do you keep those recruiters motivated?
Collaboration, feedback, and consistently rewarding people for performance, really, recognizing performance, being available to coach. I don't manage, I coach. I will never be a manager. I will always be a coach, because I don't want to sit here and tell you what to do. I want to lead you to create a process that allows you to be as successful as possible. So a lot of that would be, I did weekly one-on-one meetings with my staff, as well as a team meeting. And it was just an opportunity to touch base, see what was happening to them and what their issues were. And then have the group meeting where people could help problem solve those issues. Right. So I think it becomes down to communication, of it being available to them and ensuring that they understand, and walking the walk of constantly trying to help them improve their work life. Right. Is if I sit in my office and I'm not consistently trying to help them be better, then I've lost an opportunity to increase their enjoyment as well as improve their careers. Right. My goal was always to see the people that work for me get promoted, whether it was into an HR consultant role, a lead recruiter, a recruiting manager, constantly focus on improving them based on what they feel and what they enjoy, and then watch people grow. And if they grow, then they'll be happy to be there because they're growing while they're there.
Thank you very much. That's great. I think we're going to be using that at AppleChat, especially the coaching, not managing side of things. And then on to the hiring managers. So how can you coach the recruiters, or how can they better manage their relationships with hiring managers?
Yeah, so I've found in my career there are really like two types. There's the type of hiring manager that sends you a job description and wants you to send candidates, right? And then there's the hiring manager that wants to talk about their role and wants to brainstorm it, and then wants you to still find applicants. The first one is a challenge, and I think you have to use relationship building to get to the point where they discuss the role with you. You cannot hire for something you don't understand. I'm not saying you need to be the nurse and understand IV draws, but you need to understand what that nurse is going to be doing and what their schedule is, because these are major things that affect the candidate's interest in the role. So I think you have to find ways to build a relationship with them so that they get away from just tossing you the job description and then checking in when they want candidates, right? So managing the communication flow is key. So ensure that you have that initial onboarding, you understand what you're looking for, you ask questions to understand where those people might be, and then you build your recruiting strategy around it. The other thing I did is I asked my recruiters every Friday morning from 9 to 10 to block that in their calendar. Okay, because every Friday I wanted them to reach out to every single one of their hiring managers with an update by email. Right. Okay. Hey, Susan, this week we got 3 applicants. I screened all 3 applicants. None of them were suitable. Okay. Hey, Steve, I have this one applicant that I think you should meet. The other 3 I screened weren't a fit. So you're setting an expectation with them on a weekly basis that they're going to hear from you. If it's done by email, it's like 5 minutes or less per email, right? So it's not a huge amount of thing. You can even structure an email. And then the other thing I did was I had a monthly report to all of the hiring managers that stipulated where every vacancy was and the candidates associated with it, right? That was the deep dive. So you had a monthly deep dive and a weekly flyover that said, this is what's going on, just so you know. In the meantime, you're going to have communication with hiring managers, right? Because it's not like you only talk to them on Fridays and once a month. But by having that structured time, you control how frequently they're communicated with, so that they don't have an opportunity to wonder what's going on. Because when they wonder what's going on, they're going to assume nothing. So control the communication and control their expectations by communicating on a weekly basis. I do it with all my clients now. Is every Friday morning I send them an email. I may have talked to them on Thursday, but on Friday I send them a different email, because Thursday we probably talked about candidate A. Now Friday it's like, okay, we just talked about candidate A, but I've got candidate B, C, and D working. And conversely, sorry, when you don't have candidates, like I'm banging my head against the wall. I've done this. We haven't been able to find anybody. Do you have any suggestions? Can we ask the nurses on the floor if they know anybody? Like just having that back and forth, because what that allows is a shared ownership of recruiting, as opposed to here's my vacancy, you fill it, right? And then what I tell people is prioritize based on the hiring manager that is working with you. So, because at the end of the day, if I work with Lewis, and Lewis fills 15 people a month because he's super fast, he's super quick, well, I'm going to get my 15 hires a month for the organization by focusing on him. And then what happens is when somebody in leadership says, well, why are we still short in oncology? It's like, well, Steve didn't answer the email. Here's my, Steve, I've tried Steve 6 times this month to try and get him to move candidates forward. It's not happening. And then you let your leader deal with those instances, right? Because you cannot force someone to hire. And therefore, when you have 50 to 70 vacancies, you have to work with whoever's going to work with you the best, right? So, it's simple things like communicate more than you want, because then they know where you are, and report on a monthly basis, so you can start building your metrics.
So is it if the hiring manager isn't communicating, you say go to your manager in HR?
So how my staff would do it is they would come to me and say, hey, listen, so-and-so is not responding. What do we do? And I would then sometimes reach out to that person as the leader and say, hey, listen, just want to follow up. I understand that, some candidates have been sent to you and you haven't interviewed yet. Is there something wrong with the candidates? What's going on, right? And then, but I usually only try and do that after the recruiter themselves has tried, right? So it's not the first step. It's like, oh, they didn't respond to me in a week, let's call Kevin and have Kevin speak to them. No, I've tried 3 or 4 times to reach out to them with no effect. Now we look at escalating it, right? Because historically, my philosophy has always been, I want to build the recruiters' relationships with the hiring managers, not mine. So I prefer to sit in the background supporting them as opposed to standing in front of them, because then the relationship's mine, and that doesn't help the recruiter. Doesn't help the recruiter elevate their career, doesn't help them elevate their relationships and be more effective, because I'm going to constantly be stuck in the middle, and I don't want to be stuck in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's something that comes up a lot for us. Like the hiring manager doesn't respond, and the recruiters, they don't really know what to do. So I think, it's for us to share that process.
I think sometimes it's got to come back in your reporting as well to that client that says, listen, we've submitted 45 people and there's been no interviews. Explain to me, is there something wrong with the applicants? Right? Because you can't change what you do without feedback, right? You can't alter your tactics without feedback, right? Like if I submit a physician that, is a general internist, but has no ICU experience, and they don't say, oh, sorry, we need ICU experience. Well, I've wasted time, right? And it's about utilizing your time as effectively as possible. And every conversation that you have should be moving towards an applicant or maybe a referral, right? Like try and gain value out of every conversation that allows something to move forward, right? Or allows you to either learn something more about the candidate or learn something about the role. Like always be learning something one way or another, and approaching every conversation as a learning opportunity. And then what ends up happening is you grow your experience, you grow your knowledge, and you can communicate what you're looking for much better.
Great. Thank you so much. That is the hiring manager. We've spoken about the recruiters and we've spoken about the candidates. So before we go, the last thing I would like to talk about is maximizing speed. So how can that be done across these 3 people?
Literally as few steps as possible, right? Understand what the needed steps are. This is where you have to balance quality and speed, right? Because speed with bad hires is not a good metrics, right? Like that's a bad scenario. It's better to go slow and have good hires, but at the end of the day, the speed of business and the sheer number of vacancies, we have to be trying to find the hot spot between enough speed as well as ensuring that the quality is right. So ensuring that your screening is tight and has the right amount of questions, ensuring your interviews are are done well, and nobody should ever have more than 2 interviews in my mind. And to be honest with you, nurses, it should be 1 interview, and then find enough information in that interview where you're either, yes, we're going to screen for license and criminal check and move forward, or not interested, right? Like dragging it on is not well. And the other piece is ensuring that you set a timeline and set expectations for interviews. So I always ask hiring managers, when can we interview, and can you block some time, right? Instead of spending time bouncing back and forth, right? Or in some cases, I ask the hiring managers to book it themselves, right? It depends on the size of your team. It depends on the frequency of recruiting and stuff like that. But looking at how do you get from A to B as fast as possible without skipping steps, right? So ensure that your screening and interviewing is really good, and ensure that your communication is direct, and that you're trying not to bounce back and forth between multiple emails. I always suggest times as opposed to ask for times to a candidate. Like, hey, I've got these 3 times. Can you make it? And then hopefully they say yes. If they don't, then I will help schedule a different time. But I want to try and get it to the point where we've got them agreeing to the hiring manager's interview right from the get-go. Texting was a huge thing for the last hospital I was at. We didn't use it for anything other than scheduling and communication for updates. It's not like we screened anybody and asked them questions about their experience through text, but it was, hey, can you be available at this time for a phone interview? Hey, just so you know, I've sent you an email with an offer letter. Like just prompts, right? And ensuring that was the way, because we found that 90% of the people responded within 15 minutes. So if that texting piece is going to provide such a quick response, and when you think about nurses, they don't sit down, check their email during the day very often, right? They might check it in the morning or in the afternoon, but the rest of the day they're running ragged. So they're not going to stop and look at their email, right? And their corporate email is not on their phone, right? So, it's just, it doesn't make sense. But if their phone vibrates in their pocket, they're going to look in between things. And then they'll say, oh, I got to call Adam, right? Same thing with, the technology staff and maintenance and stuff like that. They're attached to their phones and moving around, right? An accountant's sitting at his desk likely, right? A purchasing person's sitting at their desk. If your staff is moving during the day, you should try and text them.
Okay. Good. Does anybody have any more questions about any of the points that Kevin has covered? If you do, please put them in the chat. Isnt just adds that he's found that the longer the application, the more the drop-offs, which is what you said there, Kevin.
Yeah, I definitely think just have them, if they need to create an account, have them create an account and upload a resume and apply. No, there's no need for steps beyond that.
So, Kevin, if people want to contact you, I'm going to put your LinkedIn in the chat. Do you want to tell a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so I have 2 hats. One is my organization and my team focus on recruiting physicians for hospitalists in Canada and the US, ranging of everything from neurologists to hospitalists and anesthesia. So we are a predominantly permanent search. So we will do locums for a client if it's necessary, but we are predominantly focused on permanent placements. The other half of my life is working with hospitals to look at their recruitment processes and do somewhat of an external audit. It's important to note, I don't tell you what to do because I don't know everything about your recruitment practice, nor will I in a span of several meetings. But my goal is to work with you as a second set of ears, a second set of eyes, to ensure that we can find ways to improve your process and help you decide what the best process is for you. Because not everybody has the same budget. Not everybody can buy iSIMS, text recruit, ideal, and everything, and have, that's probably about, $200,000 a year in technology, right? So it's how do we manage the process within the budgets that you have, and how do we ensure the communication happens and stuff like that. So it's, it's really just that additional external voice and person for you to talk it through.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I've put your link in the chat, and if anybody wants to follow you, feel free.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Before we go, I want to just promote. There's Patrick. Patrick actually talked about it. A webinar.
Hello.
On top.
I'm here. Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to mention that a webinar that some of our colleagues are hosting this week on Wednesday. It is called "Let's Get Real About the Health HR Crisis." I'm putting the links in the chat as well, and I'll see if I can share my screen here. So, are you going to see? Yeah, here we go. Good. You'll see the LinkedIn page, LinkedIn post. So it's hosted by Suzanne Schell of the ROI Institute of Canada, and it's hosted by Raylan Douglas of Ray Soleil Consulting, and she'll have Suzanne Schell joining, as well as Dr. Paul Woods and myself, and that's this Wednesday at 12 o'clock Eastern time. So you can see that on the screen, and then you can click the link in the chat as well. If you want to join that and share that with others, please do. And the last thing I'll say before we close, unless and Adam and Kevin might have something else to add, is that we have, I just want to remind you that the links to our Facebook group, Mixed Recruitment Secrets, and also for our monthly newsletter are in the chat above. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well to make sure that we let you know about upcoming webinars. And we're going to share this recording later as well. So if you want to make sure you get the link to the recording, send me a message and let me know so we don't miss you as well. So I think that's it for me, unless Kevin, you have something else to add, or Adam?
No, I'm all good.
No, I'm great. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.